وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. Now, if you leave something that is correct, then necessarily something wrong comes in its place. When they gave up following the book of Allah, they started pursuing other occult sciences, sorcery, magic, all these things that are very common among some Muslims also, the ignorant Muslim also. So taweez, gande, sorcery and magic and this and that. So these become articles of interest with those people who don't have the real deen before them. What tabau, when they threw back on their backs the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the real guidance, what did they pursue? What tabau ma tatlu shayatinu ala mulki Sulaiman. And they followed what the shayateen, they were pursuing or reciting in the days of the kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. All this magic you will find goes in the name of Sulaiman. Naqsh Sulaimani. You know, the taweez. As if all these things, they originated from Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam. Quran says, no. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ. This sorcery and magic, it is kufr. How could Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam commit kufr? وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. This was the shayateen during his days, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the control over jinns. And among the jinns there were Muslims also and shayateen also. So although they were under the control of Sulaiman, but they had their own creed, they had their own privileges, priorities, and they spread among the Jews of those days their own teachings and their own practices. And this is how this magic and sorcery that permeated the whole Jewish society. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. And this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when something wrong becomes prevalent in a society, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that society to some big test and trial. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down two angels, Harut and Marut. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ. In Babylon. And that was the days of the captivity of the Jews. When Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed Jerusalem and took so many of them as captives to Babylonia, Babel. And there actually, during that captivity period, this sorcery and magic and all these things, these occult sciences, they became very prevalent. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا. And these both angels in the form of men, they never taught anybody that sihr and magic and sorcery, but they said beforehand, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. We are a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are a trial for you. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. You don't commit kufr. You don't try to learn this sihr, this magic and this sorcery. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا. Despite this warning from those angels, they learned from them مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. That thing with which they could separate the husband from the wife. Separation, causing separation between the wives and the husbands. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ. Although the real fact is that they couldn't do any harm to anybody except with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing can happen without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an article of faith. No food can do any good to you, no medicine can do any good to you without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the things, they have all the minerals and all the compounds, they have their own properties. But these properties can't come into actual effect without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even magic, by itself it cannot do anything, but with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ. And they used to learn from them what harmed them, وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ, and was not beneficial to them. وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا. Although they very well knew, it was made plain to them, which was clear to them in Torah. لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. Whosoever will pursue this sorcery and magic, whosoever will purchase it, whosoever will adopt it, for him there is no share in the hereafter. ما له في الآخرة من خلاق وبئس ما شروا به أنفسهم. But indeed, it was very bad for which they sold their own souls. لو كانوا يعلمون. Only if they could know. Actually, they didn't know what they are doing, what harm they are doing to themselves by taking to these pursuits, by adopting these lines and these attitudes. They were actually throwing themselves with their own hands into the fire of hell.